We have looked at change and the individual, and now let us look at change and the organisation. It is important to think about change and the organisation as, just as people, organisations are not all the same. Organisations seldom change without some external reason or pressure to do so. Changes may be wide, affecting many of the organisation's functions, or narrow, having limited impact outside one department. They may be large, requiring major investment, or small, costing relatively little in finance and people. In this module, we look at the organisational metaphors, levels of organisational culture, how culture develops, how culture is shaped and communicated, culture and climate. This lesson introduces some metaphors that people use when describing organisations and change. Let us start with, what is a metaphor? A metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable, a thing regarded as representative or symbolic of something else. To help how we think about organisations, we look at some metaphors written by Gareth Morgan in his book Images of Organisation. He describes how the way we think about organisations, the metaphors we hold in our minds, affects our behaviour. The way we approach change is affected by the mental models we use. He lists 8 metaphors, but acknowledges there could be others. Morgan's aim was not to present an exhaustive account of every conceivable metaphor that can be used to understand and shape our organisational life. Rather, it is to reveal, through illustration, the power of metaphor in shaping organisational management, and how the ultimate challenge is not to be seduced by the power or attractiveness of a single metaphor, old or new, so much as to develop an ability to integrate the contributions of different points of view. Although Morgan lists 8 metaphors, only 4 are examined, and these are: machines, can be designed and controlled; brains, intelligence-led, and resemble a library and memory bank; political systems, systems of government managing the common and conflicting needs of various interest groups; flux and transformation, chaos and complexity, where hierarchy and control have limited relevance. Order emerges naturally. We have looked at a couple of different examples of organisational metaphors, and thinking about these and other metaphors can make a profound difference to the way we make change. It is important to listen to the words used by those leading change, and to identify the patterns of metaphor that lie behind them. It provides a framework for thinking about particular change. Which metaphors provide the best insights into the issues involved? How might we look at the change from other perspectives? It offers a way of considering different approaches to change offered by different authors and consultants, helping us to evaluate the likely strengths and weaknesses of particular approaches. We're now going to discuss organisational culture. By this we mean the established system of accepted behaviours, values, beliefs and assumptions that is widely shared within the organisation, and which as a result no one notices. In this sense, culture is what everyone knows, or the way things are done around here. The key is that because everyone knows, no one questions, or if they do, they are felt to be rocking the boat. Looking at a description of organisational culture, Trompenas and Hampton Turner, 2012, describe cultures of all kinds as having 3 levels. They describe them as layers, like an onion. Level 1, surface. Visible artifacts and products. In organisational terms, this will be things like office layout and furnishings. Who gets the corner offices? Are some chairs bigger and more luxurious than others, etc. Level 2, deeper. Norms and values. Norms are the shared and accepted sense in an organisation of what is right or wrong. They are expressed in formal ways through the company rulebook and in less formal ways by social control. Values are the basis on which something is seen as good or bad, based on the shared ideals and aspirations of those in the organisation, and as a result, guide how people want to behave at their best. A work hard to succeed ethic, or a strong value about work-life balance, are potentially contrasting examples of values. Although they may occasionally be put into words, norms and values are most often noticed when they are violated. The rest of the time, they are simply assumed. Level 3, Deepest, Basic Assumptions. In national culture, Trompenas and Hampden Turner give as an example the assumption that all people are equal. Basic assumptions are seldom articulated, except as political slogans, but underpin many of the norms and values of some societies. One example of a basic assumption in operation occurred in a retail pharmacy chain. The assumption was that patient healthcare, medical ethics, and the practitioner-patient relationship was supremely important. The pharmacy chain was bought by a major consumer goods retailer with a strong and aggressive sales culture. The merger failed, largely because the retail branch managers, mostly strongly ethical pharmacists, could not adapt and operate effectively in the sales culture of the new parent company. What other things can you think of for level 1, 2, and 3? Having thought about descriptions of organizational culture, we now think about how culture develops and how to identify it. Organizational culture develops for good reasons. At a particular period in the organization's history, assumptions, values, and norms will have led to its success. These are often the assumptions of the founder or of leaders who have been influential during a critical period. As a result, the lessons about what really matters sink deeply into the organizational consciousness unconsciously, shaping future behavior from beneath. When change occurs, it may threaten this unconscious lessons, shaping future behavior from beneath. When change occurs, it may affect this unconscious system and suffer rejection, just as the body's immune system rejects unrecognized invaders. To manage change in an organization requires sensitivity to these processes and the ability to bring culture to an organizational consciousness. There, it can be discussed and evaluated for its relevance to current needs. It is then possible to manage key messages across the organization in a way that supports change. But understanding a culture is not a trivial task. Schein argues that it is not possible for either an external person or an internal person, working alone, to identify the strands of organizational culture. It requires careful collaboration between those inside the organization, well embedded in its culture, and someone external who can see the assumptions insiders are making, supported by a thoughtful process. Often organizations talk about innovation, but if people are chastised for trying things, it is not going to support or encourage that type of culture. It is also good to think about symbols. For example, if you're trying to encourage a hot desk culture, are the senior leaders doing this? If not, what impression is that giving? We have spoken about the importance of managing messages as a means of supporting changes of culture. Carolyn Taylor, 2005, describes 3 mechanisms through which messages are communicated. Behaviors. Examples she uses to illustrate this include the link between leaders' behaviors and culture produced. Humility and willingness to admit mistakes produces openness and learning. Asking for commitment and following up produces a culture of accountability. Favoritism not based on performance produces politics. Symbols. Any time when one event is seen as part of a larger pattern, such as patterns in how leaders make choices about use of time or resource allocation. Rituals, also patterns, but this type of expected behavior could include a regular informal mid-morning gathering around the coffee machine, which emphasizes a relational culture. Storytelling, again following a pattern, as in the values in fairy stories and national legends, talks about the defining moments of an organization's history, together with its heroes and villains. Systems. Taylor describes these as those mechanisms of management which control, plan, measure, and reward your organization and its people. Examples include the way HR systems, and especially performance management systems, operate, customer processes and organizational structure, how many levels, how easy is access to senior level people. When engaging in any change that touches culture, close attention to all these mechanisms is vital. Think to yourself when working on a change, what culture is needed and what behaviors will support that culture? This illustration just helps visually demonstrate how when engaging in any change which touches culture, close attention to what we have discussed about the 3 mechanisms, symbols, behaviors, and systems is vital. There is often confusion about how the terms culture and climate are used. We have explored the way we see culture. Organizational climate is somewhat more changeable, reflecting the current feelings and perceptions of key stakeholders. For example, this might include the feelings of staff about the way they are led and resourced, whether they currently experience their workplace as a good employer to work for. Those climatic conditions are influenced in part by the underlying culture, just as global climate is influenced by the physical structure of the Earth, but are also open to medium-term fluctuations resulting from a variety of non-cultural factors. One way to think about culture and climate is culture is internal and climate is external. Now you've completed the lessons within this module, you should take the opportunity to reflect back against the module objectives. Consider whether these objectives have been met and whether you need to review any of the lessons. When you are comfortable with having completed the module learning objectives, look over the support materials and then progress to the next module.